Hi, my name is Shelby Hall, and I'm going to be teaching Megan and Caleb, who are 10 and 12, almost 13 respectively, how to make some chocolate mousse domes with a raspberry compote filling, and we're going to make a mirror glaze to put on top. Some of the things that will require some measuring skills as well as some patience and some attention to detail in order to execute it correctly. And I know as a kid those things can be hard, so I think that some things that happen is I don't think that they will really have trait anxiety for stuff because they're both my siblings. I know their personalities and they both have pretty calm personalities, as well as the fact that since I am their sister and we're doing this in their home, in their kitchen, I don't think they'll feel too out of place as we felt our entire lives growing up together. And that also goes into their state anxiety. Like I said, because I'm their sibling and we've grown up together and we're doing it at their house, it's not really going to put them in any position they haven't been in before. I was thinking that maybe well, not necessarily that they will, but that they might get a little anxious to be in front of the camera. But personally, I don't really think that's going to be an issue, but we'll see. I could be wrong. So I know that the debilitating anxiety, I guess since I don't believe there will be any state anxiety, I think it'll be very difficult to get to a state of debilitating anxiety for them. But in order to keep an eye on that, just keep an eye on their anxious state and make sure they don't get into backpedal in their learning, and make sure that I adjust the facilitating anxiety accordingly. And that facilitating anxiety is may come from me making them do it themselves rather than me doing it for them. So rather being like a guiding hand rather than a dictator, I think would be a helpful way to learn as well, but that may facilitate some anxiety. I think some defining features or some characteristics of some chocolate mousse is, well, we can start as maybe as a review from the video, from the ad. We can go over some things that are sometimes, that are always true when concerning a chocolate mousse, a mirror glaze, and raspberry compote. So for example, a chocolate mousse will always have cream, and will always have chocolate. A mirror glaze always calls for gelatin, and a raspberry compote will always call for raspberries and some sugar. On the contrary, some correlational characteristics is that we can also go over some things that are only sometimes true when concerning these same products. Again, for example, chocolate mousse sometimes uses white chocolate, and because it's chocolate, sometimes it might use dark chocolate and sometimes milk chocolate. So to use different types of chocolate, and also depending on the recipe, sometimes it might call for eggs. And an example of a mirror glaze is that you can dye it different colors. So mirror glaze is sometimes pink and sometimes it's orange, so color is not a defining characteristic. And sometimes it's like a marble, so it has multiple colors. And maybe a correlational characteristic of a raspberry compote is fresh or frozen raspberries. So a defining characteristic is that it has raspberries, but a correlational one is the fact that it can be fresh or frozen, and in my personal experience, it doesn't really make a difference. But so I think a prototype is like the chocolate mousse is like a creamy pudding, and a raspberry compote is like a raspberry filling. And because of the thickness of it, it's kind of like a jam, which I definitely know they know what that is. So it'd be a good comparison. And so I think a positive instance is just having them remember maybe something they've had that's chocolate with raspberry. I know that we grew up eating lots of Thin Mints. That includes just the plain dark chocolate with the mint. We've also had the dark chocolate with the orange and the dark chocolate with the raspberry filling. And so they know what chocolate and raspberry kind of taste like together. And this will be a little different because it's real raspberries rather than a raspberry extract though. A negative instance might be just chocolate pudding. Chocolate pudding is not chocolate mousse. When you are trying to define what chocolate mousse is to someone that has no idea, it's a good starting point to understand It's kind of like a pudding, but it's creamier and fluffier and lighter, but it's not a chocolate pudding. And some of the misconceptions I confronted in my ad is the fact that the word mousse we hear in everyday life, and I know of 3 different things that are called mousse. And there's a mousse like the animal. That is not what we're gonna make. There's also mousse for your hair, and we're not making that either, nor would you want to eat that. And then there's also mousse, which is what we're going to be making, this like creamy pudding or fluffy pudding. And maybe an overgeneralization you might see is that they might think that anything chocolate is a chocolate mousse, which is not true. Chocolate is chocolate, mousse is mousse. And some undergeneralizations might be the fact that since we're making chocolate mousse domes, they might think it can only be a chocolate mousse if it's in a dome shape, which is not true. You can have chocolate mousse in squares, you can have them in whole cakes, you can have them in any mold you put them in, pretty much, which you can pretty much have anything in any mold. But so it's not only a dome. I don't think mastery learning will be applicable to this lesson because we're only doing this for a couple hours and it's more of an activity rather than a lesson. I don't think any mastery learning will actually be happening. Based on the physical arrangement, it'll be the layout of the kitchen and everything's going to be in the kitchen. So we'll have our box of our molds and our blender, and we won't have them out yet. Maybe we will, but that's where all the bowls will be, and it'll be where the saucepans are, and the sink will be right there for the for water, any water we need, and my ingredients will be in the kitchen, so that'll be helpful. And I think that the physical climate, since it's the winter, but we'll also be cooking, I think it'll be so-so, because these are my siblings, and I know this house, it tends to run a little cold, so I think we'll just be plain old warm, to be honest with you. Based on their individual physical state, I'll keep an eye out for this. I can't predict how that'll be. It's just something I'll try to identify later when I go to label my lesson video. So to use cueing in my lesson, I'll ask them some questions, and if they get stuck on something rather than inviting and teaching them learned helplessness, I'll cue to the answer, so hopefully they'll be able to arrive there on their own. And hopefully I'll remember to do this, since I tend to have a personality that really invites and teaches learned helplessness by being those people like, no, just let me do it for you. So, and I hope I can remember to be better at that. And so, proximity, I know that males prefer to be side to side and females prefer to be closer and face to face, and so I'll try to remember that and maybe try to look out for it also when I go back to caption my video and see how I see it, since I'm going to be having one 12-year-old male and a 10-year-old female, and I'll see how they both react with each other and with myself. So information versus control language. This is like explaining versus telling them what to do. And this would include my own individual physical state, and I'll look for this, and I will look for it to identify when I go back to caption my lesson video. Some contagious behaviors that I hope we'll have is that I will try to go in with a positive attitude and some excitement to the lesson, and hopefully they'll invite their own excitement, and they'll be like, oh my gosh, she's excited, I should be excited, this is going to be so much fun. So some visualization is that I can sit here, I can do this whole like thing, and try to visualize that my siblings are my students, rather than just my siblings. Don't go big bossy sister on them. And also visualize it'll go well, right? Mind over matter. If I say it'll go well, it will go well. So using the simplified memory system, I think the sensory register will be constantly going with the smells and the heat and the colors and the sounds that'll be going on, and the sounds and those things that are always going on whenever you're in the kitchen and you're baking. And so I'll try to ask questions to try to focus their working memory on the task at hand rather than letting it just go all over the place. And I'll try to ask those questions to focus it where I want it to be as well. And then I'll also ask questions that invite long-term memory to be involved. I'll try to ask them, have you done this before? Or do you remember a time when? Or what does this remind you of? Things like that. Now, when I'm asking these questions, and I hope to be asking questions throughout the entire lesson or activity, they might have a failure to retrieve. If I'm able to answer a question due to forgetting, I'll try to use cueing to test to see if it's a failure to retrieve or a failure to store. And based on how they answer, I think I'll be able to figure out whether it's a failure to retrieve or a failure to store. If it's a failure to retrieve, lots of times you're like this, like, oh, I know this, it's on the tip of my tongue, oh my gosh, why can't you remember it? I have that a lot. And a failure to store would be like, kind of like you don't even try to answer because you don't even know, but you don't want to say I don't know. So I think I'll be able to tell. And then we can go over it again. So I think that an interference they might have is they may misidentify some items. For example, that milk is cream, which is not true. They are similar, but they are not the same. So when we are getting our ingredients and things, try to help them properly identify items and be like, when they go to get cream, that's not milk. Don't get milk, get cream. So that's, I think, some interference. And then I think some decay that may happen is that because the lesson will be split over 2 days, because the domes and the compote and stuff, they have to rest, they have to freeze overnight. So then we'll do the glaze the next day. We may see some decay from day 1 to day 2, and I can test this with some questions and giving them time to think and to answer and try to do a review, but I'll look for that when I go back to watch my lessons. I think pertaining to Maslow's hierarchy of need, it's not needed, but it's for fun. It's like, this is definitely like a luxury dessert. Yes, food is on that list of, at the very bottom, which are your fundamentals, the things you absolutely need. But this, like I said, is a luxury dessert. It's definitely not needed. You could definitely live without it. It's just fun. So some intrinsic motivation we might see is that Megan's been wanting to learn this, and I'll try to look for that to see if she's excited, because something she's been wanting to learn is mirror glazes. She and I really like to watch cake compilation videos and decorating and stuff, and our favorites to watch are always mirror glazes. I'm always like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And so because I knew that, and I was like, why not? I've never done it before, so we'll see how it goes, but I think it might be fun. I think an extrinsic motivation might be that since Caleb is a 12-year-old boy who's growing and likes to eat food, it might be he wants to eat it. And that is definitely an extrinsic motivation. Not wrong, but definitely extrinsic. And I'll try to look for this and caption it in the lesson as well. So I think based on their self-efficacy, I think both of their confidence levels will be pretty high going into this, because they both enjoy baking at different levels and doing different things, but time to time they both enjoy it. It may drop if they do not do as well as they wish, and I'm hoping I'll be able to avoid this by encouraging them and then know that they're doing really good, no matter how perfect it is or how imperfect it is. So not lying to them and not trying behaviorism, but, just being like, hey, it's not great, but you tried. So I think that could go a long way, but we'll see. I think that their self-concept may include their status in the sibling hierarchy. For example, Megan is the youngest of 9. There's 3 older girls, then 5 boys, and then her. So she has 8 older siblings, and the ones that are closest to her in age are 5 boys. And then Caleb is the second to the youngest boy, so boy number 4, and he's usually considered the family clown. So how they act towards each other and while baking might come from that. I can also start by asking them some questions based on their self-concept and see where it goes. It's like, how do you feel about baking? And I try to identify that in the video as well. So Self-esteem, I'll look for this when I'm watching for their self-concept and their self-efficacy. It'll come out and I'll look for it and caption it when I go to caption my lesson video. Based on the attribution theory, I'll watch for this or see it in the recording when I go back and hope to catch and identify it properly. So the hot cognition, I don't think I'll be using any of this tool because it's supposed to be for fun. I'm not going to try to guilt trip them into anything, so I don't think it'll really apply here. So maybe some self-regulation that might be happening is that Megan is actively looking forward to this lesson and Caleb's kind of just along for the ride. I invited him to join with us. I asked Megan if she wanted to do it. She said yeah. And then I invited Caleb to come with us because he was only getting one other lesson. I was like, hey, you can if you want. So that's kind of what's happening. So they have learned helplessness when they believe they cannot do something. And I could try to avoid this by not taking over when they aren't doing it right, or saying no without an explanation when they're doing it wrong. So try to let them figure out, and like, don't be rude about it. But like I said before, I'm their older sister, and I'm a muscular sister, and tend to invite this behavior, so I need to really try to rein it in and be very aware of myself. Based on the imaginary audience, since Megan is 10, she's also a bit shy, I'm not actually sure if she will do this, but maybe she'll pretend to be on a cooking show or videotaping. Probably not, but you never know. Personal theory is not applicable, neither is the personal fable. Based on the zone of proximal development, that'll be me pushing the envelope for everyone. I'm pushing it for me, I'm pushing it for both of them. This is definitely the most complicated and intricate baking any of us have ever done. And so, yeah, we'll see how that goes. So based on the assimilation, I can encourage this by stating what is important, or stating that something is important, and or maybe say, you'll want to remember this for later. So me using maybe those like cueing words might help it stick better. So accommodation, I encourage this by not paying much attention to pieces of information that aren't key. So sometimes it's important to read things through to understand, but sometimes some things are just filler and they're not really key to what you're doing. So based on Piaget's cognitive stages, I can ask some questions to invite their learning based on their cognitive stages, based on their ages and where they are. Direct instruction is lecturing, and I'm really hoping that that's not applicable here. I want it to be a fun activity and a fun lesson, and it should not be applicable, but we'll see how I do on that. I know that behaviorism is not going to be applicable here. Reinforcement, you can have positive and negative reinforcement. I'll try to keep an eye on it throughout the lesson, and what's really important, I think, is to have them try to reinforce themselves. Is try to like boost themselves up rather than depending on someone else to do it for them. And that'll make their lives a lot easier if they can do that at a young age. I think that we might see some myelination through some repetitive actions. So measuring things, we'll do it multiple times. We'll be reading through the recipe and probably reading through parts of it multiple times. And when you're stirring something, you're stirring repeatedly. So I think that just doing it over and over, it'll kind of start to myelinate some of those things in their brains. For the mirror neurons, I'll try to keep an eye on that for the video, and try to find it and label it later, but we'll see how that goes. Again, it's law. So I know that's not a ton of words, but that's some of them, and that's about kind of what I understand for now. So, yeah, thanks.